It was the kind of evening that should have felt familiar, comforting. The living room was warm with laughter and soft golden lights, the kind that flickered just enough to make shadows feel intentional. Plates were passed, wine flowed, and stories from college days and childhood mischief danced freely across the room like old friends themselves. My birthday, not the kind with balloons and surprises, but the kind where people came because they cared, where every face was one I'd seen before at some intersection of my life: neighbors, co-workers, college friends, cousins, and of course, my brother. He arrived late, as usual, jacket half-zipped, hair tousled like he'd come from somewhere worth being. He walked in with that brand of charisma people mistake for effortlessness, tossing a gift bag on the table and giving me a hug that was just a bit too strong to be casual, just a bit too delayed to feel completely natural. Still, he was my brother, my best man at the wedding, my co-conspirator in childhood rebellions, my keeper of secrets, my blood, and he had always loved the stage. So, when the time came to toast, no one was surprised when he stood, glass in hand, smile crooked from a few too many. "Here's to my little brother," he began, laughter already on his lips. "The most stubborn, loyal, overthinking bastard I know." Everyone chuckled. I smiled, a little embarrassed. That was his role, puncturing the room just enough to let the air in. He always knew how to make a moment breathe. "And to his beautiful wife," he said, turning slightly to face her across the table. "God, what a woman. Smart, stunning, supportive. I mean, seriously, babe, how the hell do you put up with him?" The room broke, not in horror, not in suspicion, in laughter. Big, open, full-throated laughter, the kind that says, "He's joking," that says, "Classic older brother," that says, "How many glasses of red has he had?" Even I laughed, at first, but then I looked at her. And she wasn't laughing. Her smile had cracked, only slightly, like paint under heat. She didn't look at me. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't play along. She just looked at him, for a fraction too long, and then turned her gaze to the wine in her glass. It was a micro-expression, barely anything, but I had spent years learning that face. The way her mouth dipped just a little when she was cornered. The way her fingers wrapped tighter around the stem of the glass when she was pretending to be still. And he just grinned. Not sheepishly, not apologetically, like the kind of grin that knows the joke wasn't really a joke. Someone made a joke to cover it, something about how she must have been his girlfriend in a past life, and the table roared again. Glasses clinked, plates scraped, and just like that, the moment slipped back into the current of the evening. But I didn't follow. I stayed there, anchored in that one word. Babe. It wasn't what he said. It was how it landed. Not like a bomb, but like a seed. It took root somewhere in me. Quietly, instinctively, the way truth often does. Not through noise, but through stillness. She got up a few minutes later to grab dessert. When she passed behind my chair, her hand brushed my shoulder. Light as air. I turned, half expecting her to offer a wink, a smirk, some kind of reassurance, but she didn't meet my eyes. And when I looked toward my brother, he wasn't watching her walk away. He was watching me, only for a second. Then he raised his glass again. "To another year older," he said, voice thick with false cheer. "And maybe, finally, wiser." I raised mine too, because sometimes, you raise your glass not to celebrate, but to keep your hands from shaking. And sometimes, the loudest betrayals come in the softest slips of the tongue. The party faded the way all parties do, into crumbs, into empty wine glasses, into echoing goodbyes and flickering porch lights. By the time we shut the door, the house had returned to silence, save for the hum of the dishwasher and the soft creak of settling floorboards. She smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and said she needed a hot shower. I nodded. "Go ahead, I'll clean up a bit more." But I didn't. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, fingers tangled together. My eyes drifted to the iPad on the coffee table. It was hers, technically, but like most things in our house, It was shared, same Apple ID, synced messages, no passwords between us, until now. I suppose. I didn't plan to open it. I didn't sit down with suspicion as my guide. But when the screen lit up from an incoming message, and I saw his name, my brother, I knew curiosity had nothing to do with it. Curiosity is harmless. This was instinct. The preview read, "When you're in bed, text me, still thinking about that night. Can't shake it." There it was. No ambiguity. No, babe, as a joke. No flirty emojis to pass off as banter. Just a timestamp, a memory shared, a hunger unburied. I stared at the screen. The bubbles hung in silence. I opened the message thread. I don't know why, I already knew what I'd find. But denial is a stubborn ghost. And sometimes you need to watch it vanish with your own eyes. Photos. Some blurry, some deliberate, not explicit, not pornographic, more damning than that. Domestic. Familiar. Her sitting on a couch I didn't recognize. A glass of wine in hand. His hoodie draped over her knees. Another. A screenshot of a video call. Her in bed, smiling, no makeup. The expression she used to reserve for me alone. The one that meant, I feel safe. Then the texts. I miss you. Last week was too short. Let's be careful. Okay, he's not stupid. I didn't scroll further, because I didn't need more evidence. Evidence is for courts. What I needed was air. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have forwarded it all. I could have screen recorded the entire thread. I could have messaged him right then, something cutting, something final. But instead, I closed the iPad, carefully, as if it was something fragile. As if it hadn't just exploded a fault line through my chest. In the bathroom, the water ran steady. She was singing, soft, off-key, a song I didn't recognize. And suddenly I realized, I didn't recognize her either. Not the woman in the photos. Not the woman in the messages. Not the woman who let the word babe hang between brothers like a dare disguised as a slip. I leaned back, not angry, just hollow. Because there's a moment in every betrayal where the pain gives way to clarity. When the storm doesn't rage, it pauses. And in that silence, you finally see what was always there. She thought she was hiding something. But really, she had just been waiting for me to open my eyes. And tonight, I did. The water stopped. I heard the towel tugged from its hook. The soft patter of her feet against the tiles. The shuffle of cotton against skin. Then the door opened. She stepped out wrapped in warmth. In ritual. In the kind of domestic rhythm that makes betrayal feel not like a scream, but like the absence of sound. She smiled when she saw me on the couch. "You want something to eat?" she asked. Like it was any other night. Like the only thing between us was time. Not truth. I nodded. Just once. No words. No breath longer than necessary. She turned and walked to the kitchen. Humming again. I followed with my eyes. Not my body. Because I couldn't move yet. There was a glass of water on the coffee table. It had been there since before the party. I picked it up, not to drink, just to feel the weight of something real in my hand. It didn't shatter. I wanted to say something. Anything. A question, a name, a joke sharp enough to sting but vague enough to still be safe. But instead, I sat in stillness, letting the hum of the refrigerator and the clink of her spoon against ceramic become the only conversation in the room. Inside, I wasn't boiling, I was breaking, not loudly, not theatrically, but like a rib, slow, invisible, devastating with every breath. Because betrayal from a stranger wounds. But betrayal from blood, that fractures the architecture of your bones. You don't just bleed. You disassemble. She came back with a bowl of leftover pasta and sat beside me. Her thigh brushing mine. She offered me the fork first. Eyes gentle, fingers casual. I took it, ate one bite, swallowed, and felt it sit like stone in my chest. She laughed at something on TV. Something meaningless. Background noise that filled the space between her and the truth. And I realized that everything between us now was background. She was acting. Or maybe not. Maybe this was her truest self. The one who could compartmentalize emotion. redirect guilt, exist in duality without ever seeming off balance. I wasn't sure which was worse. I leaned back, placed the fork down. She glanced over. "You okay?" 1,000 answers flooded my mouth. But I said, "Yeah, just tired," because I wasn't ready for confrontation. Not tonight. Not when the wound was still shaping itself. Not when the part of me that once adored her was now silently stepping away inside my chest. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the betrayal itself, but the quiet acceptance that followed. The moment you realize you don't need to yell, because the person who hurt you isn't listening anyway. And the glass in your hand doesn't need to shatter for something inside you to break. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. There's a difference. Revenge requires performance, timing, a desire to see someone else fall. But release is quieter. It's stepping out of a house on fire not to watch it burn, but because you finally realized it was never your job to hold the hose. She had gone to bed. Calm, the kind of calm reserved for people who believe their secrets are still hidden. For people who sleep in the silence they mistook for safety. I sat at the dining table with the iPad in front of me. The same device that once held vacation plans, grocery lists, our shared calendar, reminders about birthdays, her Pinterest boards of kitchens we'd never build. Now, it held something else, truth, and it was time to let it breathe. Not to ruin her, not even to hurt him, but because there are truths too heavy to carry alone, truths that don't belong to just one person's chest. I opened the family group chat. Family First. That was its name, created by our mother. 12 participants. A place for updates, jokes, photo dumps, holiday reminders. No one ever left the chat, even when it was quiet for months. Until tonight. I selected 3 images, 1 message thread, no captions, just digital receipts with the weight of 1,000 silences. Then I typed, "Everyone needs to see this." Sent. The message landed like a dropped plate on a marble floor. You could almost hear it. The first read receipt appeared after 38 seconds. Then another. Then another. My cousin, my sister, my aunt, my father, who never replied to anything. Even he read it. Then came the pause. 15 minutes of nothing. Not a question, not a reaction, just collective breath holding. Shock doesn't always type fast, especially when it comes dressed in the skin of people you love. And then, one message. From Mom. "Where are you?" That was it. No punctuation, no panic, just a soft voice I knew was behind that screen. Worried, unsure what part of her 2 sons had just cracked underfoot. I didn't answer, because I was already gone. I had left with 3 things: my wallet, my keys, and what remained of my self-respect. I didn't slam the door. I didn't take the scenic route. I drove aimlessly at first. Past gas stations, past midnight-lit diners, past houses where curtains were drawn and lives weren't splitting at the seams. Sometimes leaving doesn't feel like escape. Sometimes it feels like finally remembering you were never locked in to begin with. Let them sit with it. Let them explain it to each other. If they dare, let them scroll up, reread, and realize just how long the betrayal had been staged behind their backs. I wasn't running, I was reclaiming. And in the hush of that group chat, where once we planned Christmas and shared baby photos, I let the truth speak for me. Not with rage, with reality. And when you deliver truth clean, it doesn't need punctuation. It punctures on its own. There is a difference between leaving in anger and leaving with clarity. Anger slams doors. Clarity closes them softly. I didn't rush. I wasn't packing with shaky hands or broken breath. I didn't storm down the hallway or hurl accusations across the room like grenades. I simply moved, methodical, unhurried, the way you move when you already know the moment has passed. I took 3 things: my wallet, my keys, and the last intact part of myself that still believed in loyalty, my dignity. Not the kind of dignity that stands on stage and makes declarations. The kind that knows when to bow out without applause. The kind that doesn't need to announce its departure. I left the bedroom quietly. The floor creaked once. Her breath didn't change. I passed by the photos in the hallway, The one from our honeymoon in Tulum. The one at my brother's graduation. The blurry Polaroid of our first apartment. I didn't stop to take them down. They weren't mine anymore, they belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. In the dining room, the table was still cluttered from the night before. A wine glass half full. A napkin with lipstick. My brother's coat still hung on the chair. It felt absurd that he had left it behind, as if he assumed he'd be back. As if this place, this life, would still be open to him. I took a pen from the drawer. A blank scrap of paper from the side of the fridge. No dramatic words. No manifesto. Just one sentence. You too should live by that toast. I folded it once and placed it gently at the center of the table. The irony of it all hit me then, not in rage, but in something heavier, in stillness. He had raised a glass to our marriage. Had looked me in the eye, had smiled through his teeth. And she had laughed beside him, her hand on my back. The betrayal wasn't in the act. It was in the rehearsal. The pretense. The performance of love while their eyes rehearsed something else entirely. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. I turned once, not to look at the house, but to listen, for anything. Nothing. No footsteps behind me, no questions, no explanations, no last-minute plea, because they knew, even before I typed in the family group chat, even before the screenshots were shared, they knew the story would end this way. Not with fury, but with absence. I opened the door. The air outside was cool, clean, the kind that made you breathe deeper without realizing. I stepped out and let it fill my lungs. Behind me, the door eased shut, not slammed, not locked, just closed, and I walked, not to escape, to begin, because when a house is built on a cracked foundation, it's not about saving the structure. It's about saving yourself before it collapses with you inside. I sat in the car for a long time. Engine off, radio silent, just a soft tick of cooling metal beneath the hood and the rhythmic blink of the hazard lights I didn't remember turning on. Outside, the world was still, a suburban street I'd driven 1,000 times, now foreign beneath the weight of my thoughts. Houses stood neatly lined, windows glowing with bedtime routines I used to envy, families settling, laughter muffled behind drywall, fathers kissing children goodnight. I stayed in the driver's seat like a man unwilling to cross some invisible threshold. Because to drive forward meant accepting that what was behind me wasn't home anymore. And I wasn't ready, not quite, to let go of the version of life I had built in my mind. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, not in anger, in memory. I saw his face, my brother, younger and smaller then, when he used to chase bullies off the playground and pull me out of traffic without hesitation. I remembered his laugh when we shared a bedroom, the late-night secrets whispered between bunk beds, the time he punched a kid for calling me stupid. He'd protected me once, shielded me, made me believe blood was armor. And now, he was the wound, not an enemy, something worse, a ghost in familiar skin. Betrayal from blood is different. It doesn't scream, it doesn't come dressed as danger. It creeps in wearing history. It knows where you're soft, where you're blind, where your defenses lie asleep beneath layers of unconditional trust. He had used my love as a disguise. And she had hidden in the blind spot my brother created. I looked at the empty passenger seat, her seat, and it hit me, not like a slap, but like a slow, collapsing beam in a house I thought was stable. There would be no fight, no courtroom, no dramatic ending, only distance, the quiet, echoing kind that follows a bone break, not visible to the eye, but felt with every breath. A fracture in the skeleton of who I thought we were. I didn't need apologies, didn't crave confession. What I needed was space. From them, from myself, from the version of me that thought love and loyalty could hold back rot. Because some betrayals don't bleed. They haunt. And this one, it wouldn't scab. It wouldn't scar, because it hadn't torn the surface. It had split the frame. I thought about turning the key. About finding a hotel, a cheap one, with bad coffee and a too thin blanket, but somewhere I could hear my own thoughts without hers drowning them. I thought about driving to my mother's house, About what I'd say, what I wouldn't, about whether she'd cry, or worse, go silent. But mostly, I thought about the word brother, and how it would never feel the same again. Because I had learned something that night. Mirror betrayal from kin doesn't just cut. It fractures the bone. And memory, that's the painkiller and the poison. It doesn't need evidence. It needs only one moment to replay. And I would carry that moment in every bone that used to bend toward home. Until someday, the ache dulled, but never disappeared.